On BBC One, a commercial break sponsored by Omnibus.
Oh, my gosh, we're lucky to get him out. Yes, certainly were. What's up?
Midnight couldn't have been tighter. Look, she's going back into the stable.
What? No, Grace! No, don't do it!
She's going in after Midnight.
Grace! Grace! Grace, come back! The roof's collapsing! For God's sake, Grace, come back! Look at that roof!
On the first night of commercial television, BBC Radio killed off Grace Archer, and 8 million faithful listeners passed into a state of shock.
BBC alone has provided our television. And let no one, whatever his views on monopoly, fail to accord the recognition and the thanks that is due to the BBC for the magnificent, the memorable service which it has rendered the nation over the years, for its originality, its imagination, and its skill. May I wish the ITA success, and you all good viewing.
It's tingling fresh. It's fresh as ice. It's Gibbs SR toothpaste, the tingling fresh toothpaste that does your gums good too. The tingle you get when you brush with SR is much more than a nice taste. It's a tingle of health. It tells you something very important, that you're doing your gums good and toughening them to resist infection.
All right, let's just try it once more.
Okay, here we go again.
Okay.
Let's...
All right, baby.
Quiet everywhere.
All right, yeah. And action, darling. It's charming. It's charming. Very nice. So
I've got to notice the cat before I get up.
Yeah, but you did it. I mean, what you did was different. It was different, but it worked. I mean, if that happens, carry on working. It was nice. It was really nice. Can I just see it once, then? Sure.
Okay, one more time.
Yeah, one more time. We'll put the cat. Okay.
If you can give it a shake before you start, just so the cat's aware.
Today, we take TV ads for granted. But in 1955, no one had a clear idea of what a commercial should look like. Bernie Stringle, the leading director of commercials, remembers the start.
But there were lots of little production companies all growing up, learning as they went. And there was one particular outfit, and they still exist today, who bought themselves a 35mm camera and a book on how to work it. And they got their first commission from an advertising agency to make a commercial that had got a lot of animated cigarettes that had to jump out of the pack, dance to the jingle, make a little pirouette around 2 and 9 or whatever they cost at the time, and back into the pack. So they had not a clue how to make this. So they were phoning round all their competitors, describing what they've got to do, and sort of bit by bit, with people whipping over to help them out, you know, so they actually got to make this commercial, which got them off the ground doing other work. But it was all done by phoning mates and saying, Christ, you know, how do we make these cigarettes dance?
Cut it. All right. Okay. That was really nice. I'll tell you what to do.
There were plenty of people in advertising who thought TV commercials would never be as effective as advertisements in newspapers and magazines. But the more enterprising agencies set up their own TV departments. Howard Boogie Barnes was head of the first and most successful. He was also the lyric writer for Murray Mints.
Get men down!
Sorry, you just have to wait. I'm finishing me Murray Mints. They're too good to Harry Mints.
Murray Mints, too good to hurry mints. Why make haste when you can taste the hint of mint in Murray Mints?
Murray Mints, too good to hurry mints.
Murray Mints, too good to hurry mints.
Delicious. Now to war.
I can remember we had a lot of successful or unsuccessful or good and bad American commercials brought over, which we looked at assiduously and analysed as much as we could, so that we began to get ideas of what they should be like, but we didn't know how to make them ourselves at all. We just leaned on this American very heavily.
Look, here is the new Band-Aid plastic strip with new Super Stick. It sticks better than any other bandage. The proof? Take a dry egg at room temperature. Touch the egg with any other bandage. Brand X, brand Y, brand Z. Not one sticks. But a Band-Aid plastic strip with new Super Stick sticks tight instantly. Watch it again in slow motion. No pressure, yet we can lift the egg, even boil it. And the Band-Aid plastic strip never comes loose.
Maybe you don't want to broil eggs this way, but you do want the extra protection of Band-Aid plastic strips. They take better care of little cuts and scratches. They stay put.
There was a feeling that civilized English selling methods were under the threat of Americanization. The trade press offered these guidelines to would-be TV advertisers. For the first time, they could demonstrate their products directly to an armchair audience, although they could only guess at what the impact on viewers would be.
You mustn't take the viewer, the audience, it used to be the reader, for a fool. You must realise that they're normally intelligent people. They're not very educated people, but they're intelligent people, most people. And they know when you're making a monkey out of them. So his basic advice was early on to play it straight and not to do too many tricks.
Do you remember 10 years ago the children coming back to the towns from the countryside where they'd been evacuated? Where they met new people, new habits?
Some early commercials echoed post-war austerity and the thrift that went with it.
What are these children like today? Children like this little girl, for instance. Well, here's one of them, a young lady of 19 now, but she remembers.
Yes, I remember being evacuated, making new friends with the country children and the farm animals, and Mum coming to see us whenever she could.
And I remember how glad I was to see her looking so well, and quite free from her winter sniffles.
Oh, yes, I'd never had Ribena till then. Now I have it every day, for my complexion's sake, among other things.
Ah, but in those wartime days, blackcurrant juice was kept for the children. You could only get it on a green ration book or on a doctor's certificate.
Remember Ribena, the blackcurrant vitamin C health drink.
On duty, off duty. In the services, in Civvy Street, the quickest, finest, brightest way to polish boots and shoes is Cherry Blossom Polish. Be smart. Use Cherry Blossom daily.
The people that were doing the commercials in those days were mostly from a film industry that was declining anyway. You know, they were coming from newsreel or you know, the film business proper. And they, you know, and the laboratories didn't like these little short ends that they were getting to process. And now the main bulk of the laboratory's business is commercials, but in those days they weren't liked. And the advertisers generally tended to, they didn't understand, you know, advertising on television, so they tend to put it in the basement or put it out the way and hope it would go away.
Although cinema commercials had been made, none of us had had any experience of them at all or thought of them. And the moment it was suggested by the management that we would actually be making 30-second, 15-second, and even 7-second films, our astonishment had to be seen to be believed. And we used to talk together and say, well, what could you do in 15 seconds? I mean, if the man comes in through the door and he walks over there, that's going to take a minute and a half. And we thought the whole thing was most improbable. And then when we encountered our first clients at the advertising agencies, it was two entirely different worlds meeting.
Fry's Turkish Delight. Fry's Turkish Delight.
There were no clear ground rules, Experienced film directors like Ray Elton shot their commercials as scaled-down feature film sequences.
Exotic, delicious, full of Eastern promise.
Our world had always been one of reasonable approximation. You had a script, or you rehearsed, and things developed under rehearsal, and you changed them and you messed about. But the agency wanted to pre-digest everything, and they were terribly, terribly serious, and they'd think nothing of seeing, perhaps 30 actors for a no part. They'd spend hours discussing the colour of the cups and saucers that had to be on the table, whether it was a typical housewife cup. I've never found out what a typical housewife cup is, by the way, but it must exist somewhere. And so we regarded each other with great suspicion.
The BBC had its own soothing way of filling the natural breaks between programmes, and it preserved a rather lofty attitude to the tradesman over the way. At the start of its operation, ITV could only reach 200,000 homes in the London area, so was hardly a force to be reckoned with. But by the close of the 50s, when the ITV network covered most of the country, the BBC audience had dwindled to 40%. Viewers now had a choice and didn't have to watch what was thought to be good for them. And of course, everyone loved the novelty of the TV ads. Some of the ads, on the other hand, seemed to borrow much of the BBC style and emerged like miniature programmes with distinguished guest appearances.
We have in the studio Laidman Brown, who is waiting to interview a well-known personality. Here is Laidman Brown.
Meet Jupiter, a Labrador retriever, and a very noble animal too, which is just as it should be, because Jupiter's owner is a peer of the realm. Tell me, sir, have you owned Jupiter since he was a puppy?
Yes, indeed.
Jupiter's more than a family pet, isn't he?
Yes, he's a trained gun dog. He's won prizes at field trials as well as championship shows.
And now, Jupiter's owner. Vice Chairman of Crufts, Chairman of the Tailwaggers, the Earl of North Esk, a noted authority on dogs. Lord North Esk, how can the average dog owner keep his pet in tip-top condition like Jupiter here?
Exercise, plenty of it, and correct feeding. See his magnificent teeth. Dogs need hard stuff to chew on, not table scraps. Jupiter has these Sprats mixed ovals every day.
Insist on Sprats mixed ovals.
Sir Compton Mackenzie. Yes, I suppose most people who are asked what were the 3 essentials to perfect health would nominate fresh air, exercise, and sleep. I've never bothered much about the first 2, but profound, ample sleep has contributed more than anything else to whatever success I've enjoyed in life. At the age of 72, I can still sleep the clock round when the body and mind need recuperation, and therefore I can still work for 10 hours of continuous mental concentration when necessary. I believe that all my imaginative work is composed during deep sleep, but I'm very seldom aware of dreaming. For me, a worse ill than blindness or deafness would be sleeplessness.
As Sir Compton says, sound sleep is all important. Horlicks helps you get not just sleep, but sound, refreshing sleep.
The advertisers who couldn't afford the cost of a commercial could buy time in one of the advertising magazine programs. ATV's first ad mag, less cosy than most, featured Elizabeth Allen doing the rounds of the smarter London stores.
Another partnership of distinction is Lyle and Scott. As I expect you know, Lyle and Scott have the reputation of being among the leading manufacturers of knitwear in Hawick, Scotland, the knitwear capital of the world.
Good afternoon, Miss Allen.
Oh, good afternoon. Perhaps you can tell us the reason for Lyle and Scott's unique reputation.
The reason? Well, here it is. This, as you can see, like all Lyle and Scott garments, is fashioned to fit. Look, all the pieces are knitted together, not stitched. We call this one the Leslie Classic twin set. Notice the lovely quality of the lamb's wool.
Yes, but surely when you get such a high standard manufacture, it means
High prices too, doesn't it?
Oh, indeed, no. Why, this set costs only 79 and 6.
79 and 6, really?
And you can buy a Lyle & Scott cardigan for as little as 44 shillings.
More and more goods are bought by women. Advertising helps teach people to form new buying habits. Through newspapers, radio, and television, we learn how other people live. And now, you have seen commercial television's very first Elizabeth Allen shopping guide. We hope you've enjoyed it.
Of course, today we've seen only a few of the many departments in this magnificent building. And at this very moment, work is underway to make Marshall and Snellgrove twice as big as it is now. Well, it's time to say goodbye. I do hope you enjoyed your visit as much as I have to a fascinating member of the large family of Marshall and Snellgrove shops. And we hope you'll call again soon. Goodbye.
Ad mags flourished. The most famous of all was Jim's Inn, set in a pub and performed live by a cast headed by the late Jimmy Hanley.
It was much easier if we were standing at the bar advertising something, because we always made sure that we had a great big glass ashtray there, and you could just slide your script underneath it and stand there and say everything you had to say about this particular product. Then when that person had finished talking, somebody else would whip that script out and put theirs underneath, and they'd stand in that place and talk about their product, which made it a lot easier. Or if you're standing near a cupboard door, you just sort of do this. And this was a very popular gesture, because you'd say, oh yes, you get them in 3 sizes, 4 and 6, or 8 and 11 halfpenny, etc. You see the bit of writing on the hand. Roma and her real husband over the weekend were in a car crash, so she had to be written out of the programme for a couple of weeks. And when we knew that she was going to be all right, of course, we just sort of mentioned that she wasn't in tonight because she'd had a car crash. So some quick-thinking advertiser thought, now I'll get my nerve-calming pills in. So he bought into the programme, and Roma, of course, was given these nerve-calming pills to advertise when she did come back. And she did the spiel about how good they were, of course, and she held the pack in a rather difficult position. I don't know why it had to be, but so it did. And the camera came in to do the close-up. While she was saying how beautifully calming they were for the nerves, there was a big close-up of her going like this with them, rattling away in the tin.
Ad mags were banned in 1962. The Pilkington Committee held that they blurred the distinction between programmes and advertisements. Amidst public outcry, Jim's Inn and the rest were prohibited, thus cutting off small companies from advertising on TV. The shrewder advertising agencies who'd worked for many years with magazine advertisements wanted their film commercials to have a similar style. J. Walter Thompson, then the largest agency, turned to a brilliant stills photographer, Keith Ewart, to help them. With his meticulous lighting technique, Ewart set standards which revolutionized the look of commercials and made him the most sought-after director in the business.
And I was a photographer who was always willing to have a go at everything, very experimental. I liked doing new things all the time. And they knew I was interested in music too, which has been always a great hobby of mine, and in sound recording. I always had apparatus around the studio to fill in the many idle times that the freelance photographer had. And so I think it was fairly natural for them to pick on me and to say, you know, would I like to experiment with their art directors? And they gave me a 16mm Bolex, or lent it to me on extended loan, and suddenly I was in the film business.
In appreciation of her devoted services to education, Form 4B awarded Miss Patience Atkins the CDM. Cadbury's Dairy Milk. The chocolate distinguished with a glass and a half of milk in every lovely half-pound. So now Miss Patience Atkins, CDM, can enjoy that special creamy Cadbury taste, the highest order of British chocolate. Award yourself the CDM, Cadbury's Dairy Milk.
People coming in who were used to the big professional studios we knew what they were going to say when they walked in. Haven't you got a Well, of course, the answer in those days, no, we haven't. We didn't have anything. We clad the walls to keep out some of the sound with resin-bonded fiberglass and perforated hardboard. And we had a sound department in that corner and makeup in that sound department we built ourselves. And the chap had to come out every half an hour for oxygen. He had no air system in there at all. And then makeup and hairdressing were in the corner there. And the lavatory, of course, one lavatory. And if we were shooting in sync sound and anybody pulled the chain, they were unpopular for all of 3 minutes because they held up production. You could hear the jets going over, and there are a number of commercials this day. If you turn up the sound, yes, you can hear the jets going over, the early ones. They improved a bit later. Then over the road, we did all our editing here. Over the road, we had a little studio over there that's still there now, and we had an optical printer in there, so we made all our own opticals because we didn't really trust the way they were done in those days by the labs, although I'm sure the labs have improved a great deal now. In fact, we took in raw stock at one end and we turned out a finished commercial at the other end, day after day, rebuilding our sets at night. We may have a little set up, more or less, a dining room, a kitchen, something like that. But we built sets at night. We had our meetings for the next day in the lunch hour, and a commercial a day every day.
Gold leaf are made of the finest Virginia tobacco in the world, specially imported by Players. It's the rich flavor of this tobacco that makes gold leaf such a satisfying cigarette. Players Gold Leaf are really worth smoking.
We were all set up, we were ready to go. And that's the very time that you don't want to discover that somebody there actually doesn't want the picture like that at all. He wants a picture where some other guy takes it. I wouldn't even know how to do it. And so he picks on something in the set. In the case of one very nice fellow, a friend to this day, but he was a producer at the time in a German agency, and we were working on a German washing up product by one of the major washing up manufacturers. And he picked on the flowers in the set. He said, we don't have flowers in the kitchen in Germany. Well, this may be true and it may not be true, I don't know. But the fact is that the one thing you don't want to do when you've spent the whole morning setting it up, lighting it and doing it, the child is there, everybody knows their lines, you've got the slate all ready, you're actually running it, or you've even taken a good take, and it was absolutely fine. Everybody breathes a sigh of relief. We've started at 3:30, and we finally actually got something in the can. And the man doesn't like the flowers. Now, you can see what it does. I mean, the man, and that simmered for about an hour till by 4:30, somebody had to go. Well, of course, in the short term, it was him. In the long term, it was me.
Lavendo, perfumed with real lavender.
Lavendo, the silicone furniture cream.
Animated cartoons, short, sharp and classless, offered a familiar form to uncertain TV advertisers as they groped around with a new medium. In the first few years of independent television, a third of all commercials were animated.
Lavender for fragrance, silicones for speed, by Lavendo.
What a wonderful polish!
What a dazzling shine.
All shoes respond brilliantly to Cherry Blossom.
Look smart with Cherry Blossom. Be smart, use Cherry Blossom for your shoes.
Well, in the old days, you could say this is a Bob Godfrey cartoon. I can see that a mile off. It's a Bob Godfrey cartoon, a Bob Godfrey attitude, a Bob Godfrey look or something would be there. And that's a George Dunning, and that's a John Hallison Batchelor, and you could see the various house styles. Well, what's happened, I think, is that the advertising agency art director has come along, he or she has come along and imposed their style on the animation houses. So ours is a slightly more negative role these days. I mean, we have to work in the style that they want, really. So they've learnt the game, they've learnt the art. In the early days, they didn't know. They know now.
Change now to Smootho Shave Cream, the shave cream that contains its own insecticide.
15 years before Monty Python, Bob Godfrey was also mocking the business that employed him.
The hidden stubble that ordinary shave creams leave behind. He needs Smootho Shave Cream. Just make this simple test today. Take an ordinary Chinese gooseberry and shave one side with ordinary shave cream and the other side with Smootho. Notice the difference? The side shaved with Smootho is as smooth as a golf ball, while the other side still has that telltale hidden stubble. This proves that Smootho shaves closer, cleaner, tastier. What's more, Smootho contains its own insecticide, so that it kills all kinds of flying insects on contact. Wonderful Smootho Shave Cream. Time you tried Smootho, the shave cream that passes the Chinese gooseberry test.
You know, this is what it's all about. Where's your unique selling proposition and all that? There's lots of theory around and lots of market research. Whereas I think in the early days, someone would just play a hunch. They can't afford to play hunches anymore. I think it was great when people did play hunches, and very often they came off. Well, Mr. Railbrook, you know, that worked with Johnny Johnson on Railbrook, the shirt you don't iron. He was just a shirt manufacturer who was doing his own advertising. He wouldn't go through an advertising agency. And I'm sure he sold thousands, but, you know, he was marvellous.
There was an instance once when I had a client in. Am I allowed to mention his name? Harry Railbrook. And he came in to the office and he said, I want a jingle. And I said, oh, yes, what do you want to say? And he said, Railbrook Toplin, the shirt you don't iron. And he said, I want a 30-second jingle. So I said, well, fine. You mean something like this? And I went, Railbrook Toplin, the shirt you don't iron. Railbrook Toplin, the shirt you don't iron. Railbrook Toplin, the shirt you don't iron. And so it went on and on and on, and I kept repeating the same phrase because I had no other words. And I finished, and I said, well, something like that, but we get some decent words. He said, we don't. He said, we don't change a word, not one word. So it took me exactly 30 seconds, and that's the quickest jingle I've ever written.
Railbrook Toplin, the shirt you don't iron. 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 Your co-op scoops the lot. We're the only shop. Got big savings here. Got big savings.
The craft of the commercial has bred its own specialised talents. For example, jingle writing.
1, 2.
Your co-op's taking extra care. Co-op scoops bring you savings everywhere.
John, you're singing the wrong notes.
Yeah, I know.
I'm in
Playing
the wrong notes.
He's
going to whistle in a minute.
Well, I'm listening to Laura.
BBC Radio of the early 50s provided the two greatest and most prolific composers, Cliff Adams and Johnny Johnson.
Don't you sing American.
Okay.
Well, with an accent like that, John, you must be joking.
Well, I'll tell you what's off at the top. Now, nice and bright. 1, 2, 3.
Your co-op's taking extra care.
Sorry, before I go on.
What?
But sometimes I do the music first, and I might put something in which sparks off an idea for the animator or for the film director. For argument's sake, I did a thing years ago for Maxwell House. They begin with the beans, coffee beans, coffee beans, coffee beans, when they're making ding-a-ding-a-ding. And I had a cowbell playing ding-a-ding-a-ding. You see, a cowbell is a tinny sound, as you know. And when they got this done at the film company, they said, what a good idea. We can have the product, and we can have some beans, coffee beans, falling on top of the tin.
They begin with the beans, coffee beans, coffee beans, coffee beans.
When they're making Maxwell House,
they take the fresh coffee beans, only fresh coffee beans,
to make wonderful Maxwell House. Look inside the jar, it's a rich, fresh brown, 'cause there's coffee pot freshness all the way down.
Yes, there's coffee pot freshness in every cup of Maxwell House.
And so that was how we helped, you know, sort of the film company to get an idea for you know, for the beans themselves. And it was a very popular gimmick, actually.
Mum, Johnny's going off round the world.
Before tea? 1,000,000 housewives every day pick up a tin of beans and say, beans means Heinz.
The most memorable jingles have become the folk songs of a commercial culture.
We might as well eat his beans then. I think I'll go round the world tomorrow instead.
1,000,000 housewives every day pick up a tin of beans and say, beans means Heinz.
Through the late 50s, TV commercials became more and more a part of common experience. The stars of show business were no longer so reluctant to be involved.
Good heavens, I know that voice.
I'm going well on Shell, Shell, Shell.
It's Bing Crosby.
Britain is great. Well, let's see it in state. You can be sure of Shell. In the Emerald Isle, you drive with a smile. Nothing but fun on Shell, Shell, Shell. You can be sure of Shell.
The clock strikes 4. In millions of English homes, that means it's tea time. Tea time with its gleaming silver and tinkling teacups. What a happy time it is. And how fortunate the hostess who knows that her favorite tea is also the favorite of her friends. For no matter how elegant the manners or charming the company, no guest is ever really happy without the right kind of tea. Good tea, fresh tea, tea you can taste to the last delicious drop.
Hey, Beans, book bum PG tips. Book.
Funnily enough, because I was like literally the tea boy on the first ones that were ever made at Benson's. I worked with a producer that was making those. But a lot of years went by and I was directing by this time. And I was on the way back from a film festival in Venice where I picked up a lot of awards. I had a crazy good year when I won, you know, like everything there was going. And on the way back on the plane, the producer from the advertising agency that handled the chimps was sitting next to me. And we got talking, and he was a very funny man, and we got into the comedy thing. And when I got home, he rang me up and said, you know, how would you like to have a crack at the monkeys? Because we want to move them out of this area of just filming the chimps to see how funny they can be, and then putting dialogue and using dialogue to them. They wanted to start to get into treating the chimps very much like human beings. And really making them work like actors.
Get in the hang of it. Mind the banisters, son.
Oh, I can't hold it, Dad.
Don't worry, son. I shifted more pianos than you've had hot dinners.
Cree, Mr. Shifter. Like refreshment.
Oh, thank you most kindly, madam. One way of shifting it.
When a good cup of tea really counts, you're right to drink Brook Bond PG Tips. It's the tea you can really taste.
Dad, do you know the piano's on my foot?
You hum it, son. I'll play it.
Television advertising has produced its own stars. The Brook Bond chimps have been around longest. In her time, Mary Holland was so well loved as Katie that she eventually changed her name to that of the character she played.
Hello, Mrs. Coles.
Oh, you do look lovely. I'll just pop upstairs and see whether David's asleep.
Thank you. No, I expect you'd like some gravy. When you've got a babysitter as kind as Mrs. Coles. The least you can do is feed her well. Philip, telephone! She likes her gravy tasty. That means at least one OXO cube. It's fantastic what a difference a little OXO makes. There we are, Mrs. Coles. Oh, and we won't be very late.
Katie, that was Jane. She wondered why we weren't at the fancy dress ball,
last night.
There was even an invisible star who became a national figure.
And now Surf invites you to meet Mrs. Bradshaw.
Oh, hello. My landlady, Mrs. Bradshaw, asked me to mend her washing line. Up the ladder again. Still, you know, I like doing things for her. Well, look what she does for me. Look at this shirt. Boiled in the latest surf and spotless. Hey, here comes Mrs. B with some more of that spotless washing. Yes, Mrs. B, I've mended your line. What's that? You want me to hoist that shirt up? To prove that surf boils out tea stains? Aye, aye, ma'am. Spilt my morning cuppa over it. All fixed down there? Right. Heave away. Up she comes. A Mrs. Bradshaw special. There she is with the sun streaming through and not a shadow of a stain. Spotless. Spotless white. You know, it just goes to show that surf gets your whites spotless.
Cartoon characters were also heroes. Many owed their personality to the rare talent of an off-screen voice.
It was because she was very good at cartoon voices, and there were a lot of cartoon commercials being made at that time. And they realized you could do cartoon voices, so they asked you to do other
And they
ones.
wanted to sell Kellogg's sugar ricicles, and so Noddy had to say, "Ricicles are tricycles, as nicicles. Hello, Mickey." Yes, and this went on. And then we did all kinds of other Kellogg's varieties, but we did mostly ricicles. Then I did Mrs. Tubby Bear and a funny little girl called Goldilocks who used to come in. And I think she was called Goldie something, not Goldilocks. And
the one
went
they
on for
remember most
years,
was
but it
Susie and
funny.
Sammy. Tell them that was a lovely one you did. Sunblessed bread.
Sunblessed bread.
Where are you going, Sammy?
I'm going to buy some sunblessed bread.
Why? Because it's fresh to the last slice.
Let's bring back memories for those who are old enough to remember.
Maria Charles used to do Susie.
And then you did that lovely child, because I always thought it was such pathos you got into, the Roundtree's fruit gums. You know, and that lovely little moment as an actress you put at the end when he was so worried about his fruit gums.
Don't forget the fruit gums, Mum. I just love those fruit gums, Mum. Don't forget my fruit gums, Mum. I just love those fruit gums, Mum. Don't forget my tube of fruit gums, gums that last all day. Bring me home some fruit gums, Mum. All my pals like fruit gums, Mum. Roundtree's fruit gums last the longest. That's why we all say, don't forget the fruit gums, Mum. Don't forget the fruit gums, Mum.
They asked me whether I could be a little cartoon, and I'd got to sound like a cube of Alka-Seltzer. And I'd got to be bright, and I'd got to be breezy, and it was a great success in America, and I had to be American, so I said, right. And out came this extraordinary...
When your head aches and you feel bad all over. Speedy, wait a minute. When your head aches and you feel bad all over, take Alka-Seltzer for speedy relief.
Oh, and I had to do the fizz one. Because I hadn't got the right sort of noise.
Nicholas Parsons and Denise Breyer produced their own prize-winning commercial for a travel company in 1961. The film was designed and directed by Jerry Anderson, who went on to make Thunderbirds and Space 1999. Another more chilling curiosity of the early 60s showed how far an advertiser was prepared to go with scientific testing.
Hot point wash is cleanest because it cannot tangle clothes.
This is Isotope Developments Limited. It's a research organization. And here we prepared a solution containing a radioactive isotope mixed with a strongly adhesive grease. This was spread evenly over 2 pieces of cloth. We tested them with a Geiger counter. Both were equally radioactive. 1 piece was put in a hot point washing machine, the other in an ordinary washing machine, both as part of a normal load. In the hot point, each article remained separate, but the other machine tangled the clothes. Again, Both pieces were tested to see how much radioactive grease had been washed out. The cloth from the ordinary machine showed radioactive grease in patches where it had been tangled, but the cloth from the hot point was much freer from radioactive grease.
Director and crew had to be decontaminated after filming.
But hot point really does wash cleanest.
Advertising largely depends on a range of unseen skills. The copywriter featured in this BBC documentary about an advertising campaign for eggs went on to make her name as a novelist and TV playwright.
The actual writing has to be done in peace and quiet, and the only time in my day which is peaceful or quiet is in the very early mornings before the family is up. And I write, and my mind works quite fast.
Sunday morning breakfast in bed with eggs, of course. There's a lion on that egg. That means it's fine and fresh and perfect. It's always eggs for Sunday breakfast, because that's a proper start to a perfect day. The whole family needs them. It's the same every Sunday. The same game. The same fine lion eggs. You can rely on the lion.
It was one of the big spenders and the soft sellers. That is, you didn't have to try and sell very hard. You would just build up a generic picture of egg as really the woman's best friend, you see, being so packed full of goodness, etc., etc. Later on, eggs began to lose their healthy image and are now supposed to be rather bad for you. But that really is because we stopped the advertising, I suppose.
Only one out of the total of 12 thought they had anything to do with eggs and breakfast. Now, nobody misunderstood this. We failed miserably. Absolutely miserably.
Oh, is that a way?
But no, what I'm interested in, Faye, we've got this. We've got that simple formula here.
Yes.
Now we start to develop. How are we going to develop? What are we going to do? We thought we'd do it this way. Pictures of people.
None of us had ever seen a television commercial, so we had to be completely speculative about it all. Nobody we were working for, so far as I could see, had ever seen a television commercial either. So we had a vague feeling of what they were about or how they would work. I can't remember even seeing a script of an American television commercial either. But so we worked completely from first principles, and they were very long. They would go on for about 2 or 3 or 4 minutes and mention the product on the very last line. So we all thought selling was a very vulgar business in those days, you see, so you would try to do it as little as possible.
Lux Toilet Soap, the beauty soap of lovely film stars. So divinely fragrant, so exquisitely pure, the whitest soap of all. White as the white of cloud against the heavenly blue, the white of love that lovely leader knew, the white of grace that feathery fountains trace, the white caressing breath on beauty's face.
I think every woman deserves a beauty soap that's really rather special, don't you? Why not follow my example and use Lux toilet soap? Most film stars do, you know.
Let Lux Toilet Soap work its own white magic for you.
I got mentally very tired. I couldn't face another conference about a piece of ginger cake with 14 people around the table all going, yes, well, I'm not sure. What do you think, Ray? And this sort of thing. It drove me balmy. And 4 hours discussing the sort of in-depth psychology of eating ginger cake. I finally thought I really can't do this anymore, and wiggled myself out.
Over the years, you get to feel that I really should be doing something else. That at the end of it all, have I made 700 commercials? And it starts to frighten you, because you pick up a book and you read about Billy Wilder during that same lifespan, making 20 important movies, or a musician writing very important songs. And quite a lot of people that are in advertising and making commercials actually have or had aspirations to do other things. And so I think what you find is that people in the industry themselves start to knock what they do for a living. I don't actually do that, because what happens is every time I get an exciting job coming, I start off with a fresh mentality again.
I won't say goodbye.
No, don't say goodbye. Sounds so permanent.
It's only for a very short time. Look after yourself.
I will.
Sometimes commercials have fed off the movies, quoting from them, parodying them and playing with styles.
Bird's eye roast beef dinner for one. Roast beef, creamed potatoes, peas and Yorkshire pudding. Especially handy for people who aren't used to being on their own.
This growing emphasis on technique has made commercial films a training ground for ambitious directors.
In the early days when the film industry was doing fine, you used to get people who really couldn't make it in the film industry, so they ended up doing commercials. Then you went through a period when you used to have, like, you know, people like John Schlesinger and Lindsay Anderson, who used to trot around pretending to be film directors and really didn't take it very seriously, you know, tongue-in-cheek. They used to say action and cut and one more time, darling, and things like that. But they used to giggle all the way home counting the fivers. So it was never really, there was never anybody who really cared about it as much as we did, because we used to take it far too seriously. So what we used to do was we used to make films in the basement on 16mm, little pilot films ourselves. We used to build the sets. We used to do the whole thing, and just by trial and error, we started to get, you know, reasonably good at it.
Harry Hampton and his beautiful wife Melanie are the secretaries of the Bagshot and District Formation Team. Like you, they send letters. Some are urgent, some are not. To help the post office, he sorts them into 5-penny post and 4-penny post. That way, he knows his less urgent letters won't spoil the chances of his urgent letters.
Slow, slow, quick, quick, slow. 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 Slow, slow.
Help the post office a little, and you'll help yourself a lot.
I could have leaned on the bar here at Pinewood and I would never have been given a chance. What commercials enabled me to do is to put very expensive Eastman Kodak stock through the camera, and every time you say action and cut, you do learn something. It is generally in the area of technique. I think it's, you know, I learned a huge amount about photography, which I think is singly the most important contribution that commercials have made to contemporary film. You know, because a lot of pure photographers became cinematographers and didn't come from a conventional, you know, way into films. And, you know, using, you know, reflected light, diffused light, which has affected all photography now in film. In the area of art direction, attentions to detail, and basically because the two biggest evils when you're making, or any filmmaking endeavour, is time and money, unfortunately, and you're always fighting time to do it. Well, in a day, I would be able to put 5,000 feet of film through a camera, and I would only have to pick up 30 seconds of screen time.
Alan Parker broke into the feature film business with Bugsy Malone and the hugely successful Midnight Express.
Well, why don't we see if they have any bird's eye beef burgers? They're fast, ready in a jiffy. Delicious, too, especially those new pork burgers. Hey, they got a band.
Bird's eye beef burgers, when you've got to make it something fast.
Today they can spend, I believe, I mean, nobody ever did, £150,000 on a 30-second commercial. Well, I mean, if anybody spent £3,500 on a commercial with us, it was considered the king's ransom. I mean, enormous production budget. And not just because the prices have gone up so much. The idea is that we simplified things and we talked about the product was the star of the show, not the director or the editor or whatever it is. And I think what we were doing was valid for that reason. But it did mean, yes, a Puritan approach. You could almost say that, yes.
I think a lot of advertising people, if they hear me saying this or heard me saying this, would say I was out of touch or I was old-fashioned. But I passionately believe that the basic rules such as that, as selling, have not changed. And the agencies and the advertisers who are still doing it correctly know that from their sales results.
And you had rather an ambivalent regard for the client, you see. In part you thought he had to be not bamboozled, but somehow persuaded that what you were doing was actually effective, when you knew that what you were doing was actually having a good time. And there was a phrase I remember we used to use, which was, let's get down on all fours and look at it from the client's point of view.
Put the cat near the food and turn over both cameras.
Right. Action, Carol.
There are very few innocent professions, and advertising is not one of them. And yet time has given the early commercials, so anxious to sell, their own kind of innocence. They've lost their sting and turned into neglected social documents waiting for the TV historians.
Got it.
Who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know that wouldn't like Kellogg's cornflakes? Who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know that wouldn't like Kellogg's cornflakes? Have your breakfast in the better way. These Kellogg's cornflakes make your day. Who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know? Who do you know?
Even in the closest of close-ups, Ava Gardner, the lovely MGM star of Bawani Junction, has a perfect, flawless complexion. But remember, you have your close-ups too. To the man in your life, your complexion can be the most attractive thing about you. So guard your loveliness with gentle Lux toilet soap, the beauty care of the stars.
Now it's the end of the trip, and it's back to the ship. What a wonderful time on Shell, Shell, Shell. That's another road film over. Oh, you can be sure of Shell.
Thanks, Ben.
It's a pleasure, Mr. Shell. Keep going well, keep going, Shell. You can be sure of Shell.
I'm going well, I'm going Shell, I'm going well on Shell, 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 la la ba da, la da dee da, la da ba la da. Keep going well, keep going Shell, I'm going well on Shell. They begin with the beans, coffee beans, coffee beans, coffee beans. When they're making Maxwell House, da